Lawyers of Reddit, what was the least defendable case ever brought to you? Probably my client charged with statutory RP, multiple counts, who impregnated his high school sweetheart's daughter after having sex with said daughter from the ages of 13-15. He was 35 at the time of the birth. DNA in the form of a baby is strong evidence for the state. I had a client who won just shy of a 7-figure settlement in a personal injury case. She then dropped into my office to ask me to file a fee dispute against the attorney who represented her in the personal injury action. That attorney took a little over $260. 000 on this case. If you're doing the math at home. This guy took a 27% fee on the type of case where 40% fees are common. Did a f***ing fantastic job because the woman got nearly $1 million. And then she turned around and tried to sue him to recover any of his fees. I rejected the case out of hand and then got an ethics complaint for discriminating against her. A woman wanted me to sue her previous lawyer for charging her a lot of money but producing almost no work to justify his fees. She gave me what she told me was the lawyer's total work product, a page printed off the internet for which she said she was charged thousands of dollars for legal advice. She had already brought a claim via my jurisdiction's disciplinary body for lawyers. She had lost and wanted to bring an appeal. The judgment kept referring to documents that I hadn't seen. I pushed her to give me everything and she came in with multiple files full of immaculate legal work that totally justified the fees she was fighting. We told her to get lost but she wasted a lot of my time before we realized she was full of shitty. So this guy ordered a pizza. Nowhere was it specified that the delivery was supposed to be done under 30 minutes but the guy assumed that because movies. The delivery arrived 1 hour later and to apologize even if it wasn't necessary. They brought him his order and an additional beef pizza. The guy wanted our firm to sue them because he is Hindu. Doesn't eat beef and apparently felt offended. Semicolon. Also this one time this dude wanted us to sue his neighbor because he assumed the guy was practicing black magic. This guy murdered his father, then during the trial he sent death threats to his mother. Ladies and gentlemen, take pity on my client. A friend of mine was in a case where a guy was accused for graffiti vandalism, among other things. And the conversation with the judge went like this. Judge. Sir. Did you make this graffiti? Defendant. No. I did not. J. But it has your signature at the end. D. Yes. An artist has to sign his work. Case closed. Worked in-house for a famous character company with a large fan base. A few crazies a year call in. A guy called in claiming that we stole characters that he created and demanded to be compensated. I calmly ask them to provide more details so I can determine whether this has any merit to it. He states he designed the characters himself and gave it to the well-known actual creator when he was a kid. And the creator pawned them off as his own. I asked him when he was born. And it's a good 20 years after these characters were actually created. I ask him to explain this. And he pivots and says he also created some other well-known famous characters and brands. Characters and brands that are not owned by my company. I kindly ask that if he wants to pursue anything to send us something in writing and hang up. I figured if he wasn't going to do some really basic research on his own claim, he wasn't going to spend any time to write it up. Never heard from him again. My dad had a client who was on trial for being a felon in possession of firearms, possession of stolen property, burglary, and distribution of narcotics. Guy had multiple pictures of himself on Facebook holding guns, drugs, and cash. And had videos of himself both breaking into someone's house and stealing a gun as well as selling crack on several occasions. Despite my dad basically telling the genius he was going to prison either way, and to plead out for a reduced sentence, dude still pleaded not guilty. We still occasionally joke that the guy clearly wasn't competent to stand trial by virtue of being so dumb. Not my client, but my dad, and the hospital he worked at, was sued by a gentleman after he saved his wife's life. Details. Patient is pregnant with 8th child and miscarries. The fetus is removed but the patient starts bleeding uncontrollably. The only option available is a hysterectomy. It was either that, or she dies right there on the table. My dad gets called in to do the surgery. Performs it successfully. Hooray. The patient's husband is quite devout and beyond pissed that his wife can't have any more kids. So he sued the hospital. No firm would represent him. And he ended up bringing proceedings himself. Went all the way to trial and he lost hard. Edit. It was the 6th pregnancy. My bad. This event happened 20 years ago. So my memory of the details was a bit off. I have added more info in the comments below. For anyone who is interested. She lived on a large riverfront block. She had a jetty for a boat. Her large tree fell over in storm and landed mostly in the water and making it difficult to moor her boat. She wanted to sue the government for not taking away her fallen tree. Not a lawyer. I was a jailer and used to pull double duty as a bailiff. A guy stole a pickup truck and was later captured passed out behind the wheel parked on a sidewalk surrounded by a ludicrous amount of drugs and guns. His legal defense? He elected to represent himself because he wasn't done being stupid. Double jeopardy. You can't charge me for theft, drugs, and felon in possession of a weapon because I've already been convicted all of those charges before. In short, during his jury trial he admitted to doing it but explained with a smug grin that since he had already done time for the same charges from another case before that he could not be prosecuted for them ever again. This is not how double jeopardy works, folks. He's in prison for 20 years now. If he'd taken legal counsel he could have easily cut a deal for 5. I represented a tree trimming company that went to the wrong address and cut down all the mature trees in that yard. The right address was 100 North XXXX Street. And the company went to 100 South XXXX Street and just went straight at it. Hacking away. I still have no idea why the insurance company didn't just settle that one pursuit. Not me but my dad's lawyer. My dad's ex-wife decided that they weren't getting on with divorce proceedings fast enough and decided to make a move while my dad was at work and we were all at school. So she locked my little brother in my room, the only one they didn't touch, and called over 40 plus people to take whatever she thought was hers, so pretty much everything. Including furniture, old music and pictures from before she was even around. Close bracket. I show up to the house to pick up my little brother and it's empty. I don't know what she thought was gonna happen when she possessed many things that were obviously my dad's. Like pictures of just me and him. Or the computer that he bought through his job at Dell. My dad sued her 3 times and won every time. She just got caught laundering money from the summer camp she worked at and my old Boy Scout troop. That her son was now in. FCK her. Interestingly enough my dad just remarried to a district attorney. A guy wanted to sue God because it was unfair to blame the rest of us for Adam's poor choice. I read about a guy who tried to sue the devil for making him commit crimes. The judge threw it out when the man couldn't prove the devil lived in the judge's jurisdiction. Dad in his 60s hadn't been paying child support for decades and he owed more than $60k for 2 kids who were adults now. He was basically living at a farm in the middle of nowhere so no one could find him. He worked for cash so the money could not be garnished from anywhere. He then came into an inheritance, which was deposited in his bank account and promptly confiscated by family maintenance. He wanted it back. A lady was sacked by a large company. They had caught her embezzling money to fund a gambling habit. They had clear evidence the embezzling had occurred. And she did not deny it. She sued the company for $300,000 for unfair dismissal. My sister's firm represented the company against this woman. The case was so easy. The firm gave it to my sister as her first ever solo attempt. My sister screwed it up badly. Not only did she lose, the court awarded the woman $500,000 instead of the $300,000 she asked for. In the end it was a good career move. The partners all knew her name and dropped into her office. One by one. to offer their sympathy. Worked in family law in California for like 2 years before deciding I'd hang myself if I didn't change career paths. In CA, the obligation to pay spousal support, alimony, ends when the recipient begins cohabitation with a new romantic partner. A guy who was positively getting FK'd in half in his monthly payments came to the office and said he was aware of the rule about cohabitation and wanted me to argue his point in court. You see, his ex was a narcissist she was in love with and had begun cohabitation with herself. Her presence in her apartment should count the same as if there were a romantic partner there. He was bordering on begging me to take his money. I refused. Not a lawyer, but I feel bad for YNW Melly's lawyer. Dude wrote 3 songs about murdering someone. Murdered 2 people in his vehicle. Drove them to the hospital and said it was a drive-by. The shell casings of the bullets were in his car. Cell phone GPS pings him at the murder scene. He said he'd murder them in text messages and the dude pleads not guilty. A lady didn't pay her general contractor upwards of $20k after the job was finished because of a dozen or so minor complaints, like he was slow. Told her she should pay and we could help her with her complaints. Else he will probably be successful getting a lien on her home. She didn't pay. He got a lien on her home. Even offered to help her stash the funds in escrow pending their dispute, and would prevent a lien in the meantime. Nope. My best guess is that she didn't have the money and was attempting a tantrum to get out of it. This was my 1L internship, literally the first person to ever approach me in a legal capacity. Later that fall, she showed up to my school and was demanding my info from the front office, who handled it well, and I never saw her. She blames me for losing her home. I told you to pay or you'd lose your home. You didn't pay and lost your home. Surprise Pikachu face. My brother's a lawyer. His client took a backhoe, dug up a standalone ATM and scooped it onto a flatbed truck. Then, and only then, noticed a security camera nearby filming everything. He got some black spray paint out of his truck, went up 2 inches away, really nice view of his face, and sprayed the camera lens. He insisted on pleading not guilty. I read a patent and told my bosses it was both invalid and infringed by no one. It had 10 means 4 elements in each patent claim that no one would practice, or that weren't supported in the written description. Partners, my bosses, new to patent litigation, sued on the patent anyway using young, inexperienced, unseasoned attorneys in the firm. 3 years later, after billing the client millions of dollars, every defendant won by proving each claim either not infringed or invalid. Then my employer appealed and billed the client another assload of money, with a young attorney in charge of the appeal that didn't understand the underlying issues on any level because he was a former teacher instead of patent attorney. It was such a bad patent no one would settle at any point in the case. My bosses were blood-sucking trolls. I quit for these and similar parallel reasons. The firm finally imploded. Not a lawyer, but here's the most amusing time I had while being an expert witness to tell the court about chemical risks, without naming too many details and faking the chemical's name. It was about a small group of workers suing their very large corporate employer for unsafe working conditions with hydrogen chloride. So, I confirmed I didn't know these people, and wasn't, or hadn't, worked for the company. Said sure, I'll do it, and went off. I sat there answering a lot of super leading questions. What is this substance? Is it dangerous to do? Exceptionally stupid action? What would happen if you drank it, poured it over your head? Would you say that hilariously insufficient protection is enough to handle hydrogen chloride, etc., etc., etc.? That took about 30-45 minutes, after which I had just about sweated through my suit, even though I wasn't even on trial. The defense steps up and goes, "Thank you for answering all those questions. We would like to remind the court that the substance in question is not hydrogen chloride, but is, in fact, sodium chloride. Could you briefly sum up the risks in working with sodium chloride?" I'm a paralegal. Local guy in his 20s decides to go rob his dealer. He got the wrong apartment. When the college girl opened the door, he shot her in the face and fled. She laid there for hours just out of reach of her cell phone and listened to it ring while her mom called. She lived. A neighbor found her. Now she's paralyzed from the neck down, and her face is very deformed. This is a small town. During the trial, the jury was shown just how strung out on drugs he was, and how he even bragged to a few friends that he shot someone. That's pretty damn hard to defend. He got 40-something years. The girl that drove him to and from the apartment was also given jail time. It's like a 100-way tie for first place. Spoiler alert. They had the drugs on them. Less frequently. It was a gun. And yeah. Let's just say the I have a permit offense for the latter was not something we had to worry about round those parts. You'd be surprised how quickly cases become at least theoretically defensible as soon as you establish any distance whatsoever between the client and the contraband. Though, in fact, I'd say there's a systematic bias in juries and lots of inconsistency in the relevant case law about how difficult it is, and or ought to be, to prove possession beyond a reasonable doubt. It errs, of course, in favor of the prosecution. Guy wanted me to sue the city because the city took too long to bust his neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. Guy claimed his neighbor's house had mice because of the garbage truck that was parked there when it wasn't hauling garbage. He said the neighbor's mice were causing his house to have mice, reducing the value of his house so he couldn't sell it. I asked him how long he had been trying to sell his house. He said he wasn't trying to sell it yet. I asked him what he had done about the mice so far. He said he called the city to have them get rid of the mice, but the city refused. I asked when he reported the neighbor's illegal garbage disposal business. He told me he never reported it. The city just towed the garbage truck after the neighbor was arrested for some unrelated crime, DUI. I asked the guy how he knew all this, and he said the neighbor and him were partners in the illegal garbage disposal business, and his neighbor's old lady told him about the arrest and the towed garbage truck. We once had a client skip bail and run. I looked him up on FB and he had posted a photo of the bond paperwork and a bunch of $20 bills. The post reads something like, "Man FCK the law and my bondsman. Can't nobody tell me shit. Blah blah." Typical hooch tea. We live in BFE, Texas. Dude is not a gangster. Anyways, he didn't realize that the only reason we bonded him was because we were going to represent him. Withdrew on the bond in the case. In the motion to withdraw, we quoted his FB post and attached a copy of it as Exhibit A when we filed it. Edit. Changed hired to bonded. Not a lawyer, but I was a witness to an assault a few years back. Had to get up in the box and be questioned. Terrifying. Anyway, it was on a night out. Hanging around outside a club. A female friend of mine took exception to some dude grabbing her ass. Both start slinging insults at each other until the guy decides to sling his fist at her face instead. Right in the presence of 3 police officers, who witnessed the whole thing and arrested him immediately. The guy for some reason denied it all, despite being caught literally red-handed by the popo, and it had to be resolved in court. How would you even argue on his behalf? I represent condo and homeowners associations. One of my condo association clients wanted to evict some tenants because they were fat. I am not even joking. Now, the law does, in some cases, allow the association to evict non-owner tenants. This is very fact specific. However, I spent a long time trying to elicit from my client exactly what these tenants were doing that warranted eviction. Client: well, they're just disgusting people. They are fat. Penge 1028. Exasperated: you can't evict someone because they're fat. We did not end up filing suit. I got sued for $50,000 by a man who claimed his arm was broken when he sideswiped my car at 2 AM. We both got a DUI. And he was also cited for going the wrong way on the freeway. My attorney determined that the guy had been to the DR. the day before the accident and had received treatments to his broken arm. He was charged with filing a false police report and some other charges. Ended up doing 90 days in county lockup. I paid my fine, did the required procedure to get my license back, and learned my lesson. Obligatory, not a lawyer, but my dad was. My dad was a patent and trademark attorney about 10 years ago and worked for a pharmaceutical company. The owner of the company adopted the slogan "Just do it," not knowing that the trademark belonged to Nike. When the owner found out that the trademark belonged to one of the biggest companies in the world, rather than change the slogan and avoid a lawsuit, he calls up Nike and expresses how funny he thinks it is that they have the same slogan. My dad got them to settle the case and the catchphrase was later changed. I had a guy want to sue a popular chain restaurant because he had a heart attack there. Couldn't say what the restaurant did wrong, but it was clearly their fault since it happened in their restaurant. No thanks.